So today, I thought I would share with you one of the learning experiences that I had during the pandemic. Not so much during lockdown, it's happened as lockdown restrictions were beginning to be lifted, but during a period when we were unable to travel internationally. So since about 1998, I have from time to time travelled out to Singapore and worked with my colleague Barney Wee at Mind Transformations. And in recent years, I've been running the LAB Profile Practitioner training out in Singapore, which has been well received. And I would have been due to go out and do that again in 2021. But of course, I couldn't travel. So one of Barney's team, Joseph, who's been very involved in me running those courses, has been very instrumental in the promotion of it and a great champion of the LAB Profile in Singapore. He gave me a challenge and he said, how can we do this program online so that the quality of the learning that people get is even better than if you were physically present in the room with them? That's quite a challenge. And I will confess that doing training virtually isn't something that I ever was really very enthusiastic about. But sometimes you have to learn to do things because the situation demands it. And I have to say, I've been pleasantly surprised with the quality of work that we've been able to do remotely. I still prefer to be in the room with people because, well, I think something different happens when you're in the same space and you breathe the same air. But given that we couldn't do that, then we have to accept that there might be different ways of doing things. And so what Joseph and I did, and we worked on this over a period of months, we decided that rather than just teaching about the LAB profile, that we would attempt to bring it to life with the use of an online game. Now, the language and behaviour profile, if you're not familiar with it, is a way of profiling not so much personality, but it's more to do with how someone communicates and how they behave in a specific context. So it's not about who you are, it's about how you are in a particular area of life. And it gets used a lot for work profiling. And because of that, it can be a really useful thing in recruitment. So we designed a game. We call it the Dream Team. And the premise of the game was small groups of people were formed into companies, and they came up with their own name and the values of the company that would define their culture. And then we set them the task of recruiting new people into the team using everything they'd learnt about the LAB profile. So that involved writing job adverts, it involved interviewing candidates, and then it involved, because there was huge competition for the candidates, it involved selling the role to the candidate using what they'd learned about language and behaviour. So this all took place over 6 separate days, 2 days, 1 day, and then a chunk of 3 days where we ran the game. And because of the time difference, I was starting very early in the morning, which was another kind of challenge, but I'd found that once I was working, it was all okay, and I was just back into presenter mode. So it was a very, very different way of working. The thing that impressed me is how people really embraced the technology. So there were a number of things that happened that couldn't have happened had we all been in the room together. So, for example, I mentioned that we put people in groups and they formed their own companies. We only gave them about 15 minutes to do the exercise where they came up with the company name and the company values. But by the time they came out of their breakout rooms and all came back into the main room, several of the groups had designed their own custom backgrounds on Zoom and they had their company name. Now, for me as a presenter, that's really helpful because I could then look around the screen and I could immediately see who was working with whom. These 4 people are all a team, those 4 people are a team. And that really helped because otherwise I would have been peering at their names at the bottom of their screen and figuring out, it's a bit like sort of playing Snap, but visually it was very, very easy to see. So that was great. And of course, the other thing that we were able to do, because we were online, is that we could have as many breakout rooms as we needed. So there were parts of the game that were quite complex, where we had each team had their own sort of office, if you like, their own team room. We had candidates who had their own room and people could go off and conduct interviews. We had a couple of coaching rooms. Of course, I really must give a shout out to the people who managed the technology because I didn't have to do any of that, and it made my life a lot easier that I didn't have to do figuring out how many breakout rooms we need or allocating people here, there and everywhere. So one of the things that I learned from doing this is that it's so much easier if you have a team. You know, I'm used to turning up and running training programs on my own, but if you're going to do things virtually, it makes life a lot simpler if you have a whole team of people working with you. Somehow that just kind of reduces the stress. It, you know, dilutes the responsibility, if you like. So one of the things that I took away from that experience was there's always kind of creative solutions that whenever you think, you know, we can't do what we'd planned to do, if you're prepared to look on it as an opportunity, there's always the chance that you're going to come up with something that will perhaps be even better. Now, we don't do any kind of real measurement of, you know, how well embedded are the skills. We look for, you know, can people conduct the interviews? Can they spot the patterns and so on? So that the certificates do mean something. But there isn't really any way of saying, well, this person's a better practitioner than that practitioner. But I think what I saw as a result of doing the course that way is that people had more confidence in their skills, having spent the time playing the game, as well as having learnt the patterns and the techniques and the way to conduct the profiling interview. So if doing something virtually and doing it in a different way meant that people went away more confident in their skills, then I'd like to think that we did actually fulfill Joseph's challenge, that by doing the thing differently, doing it online, we were actually able to do it slightly better. And it pains me to say it, but slightly better than if I'd actually been there in the room with them. Oh well.